We have got something unique for you today, a leather Christmas card. That's coming up. Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Reese. This is Weaver Leather Supply. Today, we're gonna be taking on one of my favorite projects for Christmas time, and that's gonna be a leather Christmas card. Now, you may have seen the thumbnail and think, man, that's probably out of my skill set. Truth is, it might be, but if you've got an understanding of how to run a swivel knife, you can make it do what you need it to do, and you can run a bevel. This is probably within your wheelhouse. This is something that you can take on. So don't let it scare you right away. We're gonna walk through it step by step. First thing that we need to do is go ahead and take care of those prep steps. First of all, I'm using about a 4 to 5 ounce leather. It's pretty lightweight. We're gonna tape the back of it and case it. After that, we're gonna go ahead and trace our pattern onto the tracing film and then onto the leather. Now, one thing I'll point out is that this pattern has a lot of straight lines and right angles for the tooling window and the outside of the card. You don't have to trace all the way around that. All you have to do is just mark the corners. Then you can go back with your straight edge and mark those in. We've got it traced in. Now it's time to go ahead and start cutting in the pattern. Now, one of the things you might notice is that the outside border of the Christmas card, I'm cutting it in with my swivel knife, which at first doesn't make any sense, right? We're gonna cut that out with an X-Acto blade. Why would we need to cut it in with a swivel knife? Well, the truth is you don't have to, and I don't do it all the time. Sometimes I will do it just because that swivel knife cut will act as a guide, kind of as a gutter for your blade to run in. So it's going to act as a guide when you cut it out later. So it can be a little bit of a help if you have a little bit of trouble cutting straight lines. But again, it's not necessary. I don't do it all the time. When it's time to start cutting in the snowflake, I would suggest that you start with those long straight lines, then move to the curves, then move to the interior cuts. When you start working on the lettering, turn the project as much as you need to. There's no sense in making it harder on yourself than you have to. So on the outer points of the snowflake, there's some areas where we need something round. And reality is they're too small to cut in with a swivel knife. We could do it, but why would we want to when we can just use a cedar there, right? So for one of them, I'm going to be using a cluster cedar. It's this one right here. And on the other one, I'm just going to be using a large cedar that fits that area. Now, as you're watching me do this, you may notice that the project has already been stamped. I'm just going back over it. Well, that's because I forgot to turn the camera on. So I'm going back over it, showing you how to do it. But yeah, I did it and didn't have the camera on. Sorry about that. Now we get to the beveling, and this is one of those parts that's really going to make everything pop. I'm going to be using my steep bevel, and I'm going to work my way around the inside of the tooling window. This is a really important step, so take your time. It's a lot better to go slow and get it right than to go fast and have to go back and fix mistakes. One of the reasons I like using a steep bevel on the tooling window is that it kind of makes it look like the edge of it has been tucked under the frame. It's a little bit of a pillowed look. With a traditional bevel, you'll get more of a gradual fade under the border, which is fine. It just depends on your style. For the snowflake, I'm going to be using a steep bevel for the whole thing, but I'm going to be alternating between two different sizes. The medium's going to work for most of it, but there will be some tight spots where I have to drop down to the smallest one. Well, the beveling's out of the way. It's definitely one of the more challenging aspects of this project. Now, the next step is to create some separation between the background and the design. That's going to give us more depth in our overall look, and it's going to create some visual separation. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use this backgrounder right here, and I'm going to go over the entire background inside that tooling window. So I really want a subtle texture in the background, so I'm going to do two things. Number one, I'm going to be rotating that backgrounder in my fingers as I work my way across it. That's going to make sure that we don't get any lines or repeating patterns in the background. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to tap the stamp just hard enough to leave an impression. Now, the closer that I get to the snowflake in the design, the harder I'm going to tap it, but not by much. So we've got some really nice curves in the snowflake. And for those, I'm going to be using a pedal lifter to add a little bit more depth and dimension. For most of them, I found that the larger of the pedal lifters worked perfectly. It fit right in that little pocket. There was a couple of them where I had to drop down to the medium, but for the most part, the large worked perfectly. So what about the lettering? That's one of those things that there's 1,000 different ways we can do them, and some of them are pretty complicated and pretty challenging. Well, since this is something that we may want to do multiples of to send out to multiple people, I thought we would go with one of the more simple techniques that gives us a really good result. So to do that, I'm just going to slide my modeling spoon along the edge of the letter. The goal here is to round off those edges, and I want to emphasize that I'm working the letter. I'm not working the background that's around the letter. Tooling's done. Now all that's left is just to cut it out and add the color. So the next thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be cutting off the excess leather around the outside of the pattern. Then we're going to bevel the edge. We want the inside of this card to be just as nice as the outside, even though it doesn't have a lot of detail on the inside. So what we're going to do is I'm going to be lining the inside with veg tan liner leather. This is about a 2-ounce veg tan, and I'm going to be taking contact cement, putting it on the inside of the card, putting it on the back of the liner leather, and putting those two together. You can probably see that this bottle's getting close to being empty, and because of that, the glue's gotten a little thick. Now you can thin it down. I just didn't have any of the stuff to thin it with, so I'm working with what I got. After the glue gets a little bit tacky, go ahead and put the two of them together and trim off the excess of that liner around the outside of the card. After all that work, we really want to make sure that the edges of the Christmas card are nice and slick. We've got a good burnish on them. So I'm going to be burnishing with gum tragacanth and a slicker. For this card, I really like the icy look, kind of a blue and white color palette. So I'm going to start out by painting the whole thing Angelus white. Now, one thing I'll mention with Angelus white, white almost always, no matter what brand it is, almost always takes multiple coats. For this project, I had to paint the inside and the outside of it 3 different times to get a nice solid white. Once we've got it painted white, I'm going to seal it with leather sheen, the aerosol kind. I did that off camera outside because, fumes. Then I'm going to go back and seal it with tan coat. So I've had a few of you ask, why would we use aerosol leather sheen and tan coat at the same time? Well, the short version is we want the best of both worlds. Leather sheen, the aerosol kind, can be applied without needing to touch the project, which means we're not going to lift any paint off as we put it on. Tan coat can actually lift paint a little bit. It's not too bad. Tan coat, however, is a really good resist. Leather sheen, not so much. So by using leather sheen to lock the color in place and tan coat as a resist, we get the best of both worlds. With that done, we can add some actual color to it, not just white. And this is going to be one of the reasons why we added a tooling window. Essentially, it contains the artwork and the color, not just our tooling. We're going to be mixing Phoebing's Neutral Antique with Angelus Blue. There's not really a ratio, just mix it until you get the blue that you want. Once you've got the color you want, go ahead and paint it into that tooling window. Don't worry if you get a little bit outside the window, we can go back and paint that white, so it's not a big deal. Once you got it painted in, we're immediately going to go back and wipe it off. Once you've buffed all the antique off, set it aside, let it dry. We want to do that before we do the next step, which is sealing it again with tan coat. Now, I did that off camera. It's pretty quick. You've already seen how to do it. Just a light coat over the top of it. That'll lock your color in. After that, we need to add something to that snowflake to make it pop. We want to create some separation between the snowflake, the background, and the lettering. So how do we make that snowflake pop? Whatever we do to it needs to be subtle. It still needs to look like a snowflake. Well, to do that, I'm going to be using Deco Art Shimmer, Deco Art Enchanted Shimmer. This is a clear glaze, and it's got a little bit of a glitter look to it. It's not actual glitter, but it's got a shimmer to it. We're going to go in and paint the entire snowflake, the blue antique and all, just paint it over the top of it. As it dries, it's going to pick up that shimmer. So the next to last step, we need to go in and paint the letters blue. I'm going to be using Angelus blue and an Angelus fine tipped brush. Now, if you want to take it one step further, after you've got all the lettering painted blue and they're dry, you can go back with Angelus high gloss and add that to the lettering, and it'll give you even more separation. Once we've got all the letters painted, all that's left to do is fold it and make it look like a Christmas card. You just want to go slow when you do this, because if you go too fast, it can get out of square and you can create cracking and that kind of thing in the spine. So just slowly bend it and start working it over. Don't get in a hurry with it. And one thing you need to know is a lot of times these Christmas cards won't lay perfectly flat like a paper card would. There's just too much in the spine. Now, if you wanted to, during the process, before we put the liner on there, you could skive that down and it would make it, sit a little bit flatter. But I like the fact that it's got a little bit of a V to it when it's open and you're not holding it. That means that it stands really well on a table or on a mantle. Once that's done, we're ready for final results. That's going to do it for this video. I will see you in the next one. In the meantime, go make something amazing and have a Merry Christmas.